When you come into the world, we take on the identity of those who are more powerful than us. What we're looking for is a kind of person who is looking for meaning. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to the Sunday Conversation. I'm Alan Masters. I came again like my dad asks me to come, which is to come be ready to be a conduit instead of my own will or my own ideas. And I'm just a fool like everybody else, trying to connect with a higher power inside of myself. And trying is the key word. I just have to let go and stop trying. I mean, don't we all have to just learn how to let go and let God? And a guy in the audience asked me a question. I just came back from China. And he says, how was it? And my response was a little bit interesting to my own self. As it was coming out of my mouth, I thought, that's right. So I'm going to start right there. It's a perfect starting point, and it'll just weave along. So I went to China, and before I even landed, I had like a paradigm shift of thinking. I'm looking out the window, and it looked beautiful. In the airplane, I was seeing the landscape, and it was like farms everywhere, and the rice paddies, and of course, not just rice. I mean, I think in our mind, we think all they grow there is rice. And again, this is stuff that's just been downloaded, or it's just our perception. And as you know, perception is reality. And that also works with us in how we judge people. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But I looked out the window and I saw, man, it's green. Yes, it's, air quality not so good. But they're working on that. So I thought, this is something strange here is going on. Mostly inside of my own head. So I got out of the airplane and we went through this amazing, beautiful airport in Beijing. And I'm looking around going, this is amazing. I expected to land like in Tijuana, Mexico. I don't know why. It just felt like in my brain with the perceived notion that China is this third world country, and I was thinking I'm only going to drink bottled water. I'm not going to eat anything that doesn't say McDonald's or Burger King on it, because you've heard all these horror stories. And I've watched my father with the fact that he got some amoebas in his stomach, and they asked him, well, have you been to China lately? And I remember going, China bad, because third world country, they grow rice there. I mean, it's like all these little crazy thoughts I've had ever since I was a kid. And it was beautiful. I went to the Great Wall of China, and it's a great wall. I'll tell you what, I don't think Trump can build that wall. It took 2,200 years. But I was there, and the more I was there, I would look at the people. I'd look them right in the eye. People that are serving you, and there's a terrible communication gap. We can't really talk. It's more like we have to look each other right in the eye and say, food, I want some food, or whatever it is. It's just a difficult thing. So you're really having to communicate on a very, I think, a special level of they're looking at your face and into your eyes, and you're looking right into their eyes, and you're maybe pointing at something, and they're, okay. And what I saw was a very hardworking people. Very, I think, in many instances, very innocent in their face, very innocent, very sweet, very willing to help. And it was just a really strange experience for me. And so what I said to this gentleman that asked me about China and my experience, I said, I was kind of disappointed. I felt like I'd been lied to my whole life. And I think that's kind of how we are when we grow up. When we one day have a spiritual awakening, and we say, wait a minute, religion or Christianity or Judaism or whatever it is you do that you were brought up, I mean, maybe it's Hindu, maybe it's Buddhism or whatever it is that you've been taught, maybe you feel like, wow, there's more to this. They didn't teach me the most important parts. And maybe they can't. Maybe it really truly is an experience that you have to have, that we have to have. You know, the journeys of our lives. Maybe we have to get in trouble and go to jail. Maybe we have to get a divorce. Maybe we have to get into fights and get drunk and take drugs. And maybe we have to do all those things in our lives because so much of us, we do these things and we have guilt over them because why couldn't I have found Christ without that? I'm sure it's possible, but I don't know how possible it is for the average person. So guess what? We're all like mice trying to find our way out of the maze. And then every time we go, I've been here before. I went down this path before. I recognize this corner inside the maze. I recognize this place. I don't want to go this way. I got to turn around and go back. Start over again. We come back to our center and we start over. And all of that is what I call the trying, because we're trying to find our way out. And really, when the reality strikes us that we're not rats and we're not in a maze, that all we have to do is be still and know that He is God, and He will put it in our heart, the way out of this crazy journey that we're on, this crazy trying that we're trying to do. We try every day. We try. I said to my wife this morning, we just yesterday renewed our vows after 33 years. And so we woke up this morning and I said, so how do you feel? And she says, I have a headache. And I said, but how do you feel about what happened yesterday? And she said, fine. So I went in and took a shower, got ready, and came back, and I wanted to say to her, so we're going to try every day to be kind to each other. And then as those words came out of my mouth, I realized, there it is again. I'm trying. It's, you know, I mean, I think that just like you, I want to be a good person. You want to be good people. All of us. We all want to be good. That's why you're watching or sitting here today. And so we try. We get up each day and we try. But I'm learning more and more about this letting go and letting God. I mean, how many times have we heard that in our lives? I'm almost 60 years old. Almost 70 years old. Closing in on who knows what. Almost a little over 30 years old. Doesn't matter how old you are. You have to learn how to stop trying.
You are replicating every thought and everything. And I'm wondering if all of us had the same. He's repeating all of what we think, correct? Yes. And what we do. Our journeys are all exactly the same, seeking the same thing. And revelations from God every day about our journey that He gives us to know these things that we all know. Therefore, we know that we're brothers and sisters in Christ because it's amazing. It makes me laugh because you are, it's amazing. It actually enforces something that I'm always trying to seek something, and I'm reading the Bible, I'm understanding and asking God, give me revelations of who you are, because I don't want to be what I am. But I know you're the only one that can live like Christ did, because He's replicating Him, the Father. And each of us are on our own journey. But I see myself trying. I was like, Mary, when are you going to stop trying? You know that. But yet, it continued to be the same. And I'm like, okay, my journey is going to constantly be that way, because as much as I try to be a good person, it's like we're all on the same journey and discovering different things and realizing we're judging. And it's just amazing. I opened a scripture today, and it was like, don't try to be anything. Just be in the moment where I'm at, you know? It was just so neat. And then just to have this constant reinforcement, I guess I can just go on my journey now. I don't need to join anything. I want to join a church where people are constantly helping each other and doing the work of God outside the church, out of this. Because I have to tell you, I've come a couple times, and it's always the same people repeating the same thing, and it's like, it gets old.
Yeah.
And I can see why this hasn't grown.
Well, imagine this, Mary. Imagine if you were lying in bed and you were sick. And imagine if the Father, or let's just say Jesus, came into the room, and you were sick, and you were sick in the heart and in the soul. But you were so sick that you were laying there in bed just praying and praying and praying and trying to find the path to God. Here's what I think he would say. He would put his hand on yours and he would say, Mary, be still and know that I am God. And in that moment, maybe you could just let go.
You know that right now, but when another situation comes and you catch yourself being who you were.
So what would you do in that case?
In which one?
When you've fallen back off the wagon, you might say.
When I fall, I'm like, oh, crap, I did it again. That's what I say to myself. Like, when are you going to change, Mary? When are you going to stop doing what you always do? And I'm like, well, the moment you just let go of trying to be you, trying to be something, first of all, but letting him come and reside in you. It's learning. I even prayed this before I got here. I said, Lord, you know, I'm tired of being me, but then I keep trying. When am I going to totally let go and let your Holy Spirit come and just live totally in me? I know he is, but I see that Mary with this try. When is it ever going to stop? When I'm tired of, I guess, right?
Yeah, when you're
you
tired
keep
of
doing
trying.
it until you're like absolutely tired.
You know what you have to do is you have to wear yourself out, unfortunately. We all do. Because we have so much energy and so much zest for life that we think that we are God and that we can find the way. And of myself, I can do nothing.
We know those scriptures and we
Okay.
know that. It's just when you're
Right?
like, oh.
So
Yeah.
I keep coming back to what I've been going through lately, which is when I find myself trying, I just go, hold on. Hold on, Alan. Stop. Let go. So my wife said something to me, and I said this to her yesterday in renewing our vows. My son, my oldest son, Jason, who's 31, he read this little thing that he found online, which is the renewing of the vows.
Contentment and heighten your joy in living. Please join hands. You already have.
And then at the end, he said, do you want to say anything else? And I said, yes. I said, I want to say thank you for the 33 years of fidelity. And I have also had fidelity towards you. I have been honorable towards you. And I thank you for going through the good times and the tough times. And I said, but now it is time for me to yield. Instead of being the God of the home, the man of the home, I yield to the Father in heaven. And I want to work his will instead of forcing my will down my children's throat and my wife's throat and everybody else's throat. I want to yield to the higher power and have him speak through me instead of me feeling smart that I've remembered all these verses and chapters and, you know, I don't remember them. So I feel fortunate. I've always thought, I don't want to be one of those guys that spews the verses and chapters out like, you know, like it's more important than real life, because real life happens.
Right.
And
I wanted to at one point to try to memorize. I cannot. I just can't. But when I go out sometimes and I'm just talking and scriptures will come to me, I'm like, what the heck? I was like, and then people are, I think the Word of God definitely needs to be repeated because he has such perfect words. But then you become part of those words when you live his, right? So it's just amazing to see him speak through you. And he's like, oh, praise you, God. Thank you so much because, you know, it wasn't me that spoke that moment. I even learned through that. And I thank you for letting me experience that. I get to experience it sometimes, and I'm so grateful. Praise God, I really am, and I'll give him the praise because that's what he wants. It's a beautiful journey, life, when you're just starting to discover all this stuff and knowing who he is and how grand it could be if you just totally let go. But those experiences that you do get, hey man, they're the awesome. They bring life to you. I love it.
well, and I also think that we are so afraid as human beings to not have our persona that we have spent so many years building like a gigantic pyramid of, you know, each brick, putting it all in the right place to make the perfect shape. You know, we work out real hard to have the perfect shaped body. We you know, as men and women both put makeup on. I had to put some makeup on. I was putting some makeup on because they said, your face is too shiny. I thought, all right, I'll put some makeup on, which is just like a powder. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, how weird is this, you know? And I've had to do it. I've done television for 30 years. But every single time it feels very strange because I'm making myself look a little bit like what I'm not. I would prefer to sit up here in a pair of blue jeans and a t-shirt. So today I'm wearing a t-shirt and I just put a suit over it, suit coat. And I feel more comfortable because I don't want to feel high and mighty. I don't want to even tempt myself to feel. I drank some coffee this morning and all right, watch that relationship. The relationship between me and that coffee. I don't want that coffee to make me feel good. We keep talking about coffee because it's a drug. And let's not think it's anything other than a drug because really it's a drug. So I'm looking at all those things. And some people say to me, well, how do I do this? And how do I do that? And how do I do this? And they want an answer for each different kind of a situation. It's like you take this pill to get rid of anger. You take this pill to get rid of judgment. You take this pill to get rid of whatever. It's not like that. And last week I said, I don't fear the man that practices 1,000 kicks once. I fear the man that practices one kick 1,000 times. That was Bruce Lee. So if I give you the condensed version of what I was trying to say last week, if we could practice letting go and finding a calm place, like it says, be still and know that I'm God. If we did that 1,000 times, you're going to purify that relationship you have with your Creator because that is what we forget to do. We forget Him. He doesn't want to be forgotten. He wants you to be still and remember Him. And even, you know, eat this and remember me. I mean, there's so many things, so many signs that He's given us to remember Him. And you know why the Jews wear the yarmulke? It's because they put the little yarmulke on their head to remind them that there is somebody greater than them, above them. It's a constant, it's a reminder. It's like, I am nothing, Father. You know, compared to you, I am nothing. So if we could just have that, practice that one kick 1,000 times, we'd be pretty darn strong in our conviction, and we wouldn't have to remember verse and chapter and all these wise things because we would be a conduit, and He would speak through us.
Because I always want to know God, but I'm like, well, the scriptures obviously tell who He is and how we should live. And when you do reading it, you're relating to it. And you go, oh my gosh, I didn't know all that. I'm supposed to not do this, not do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming. But you don't have to remember. You don't have to hold on to
That's
anything.
right.
Because once He's in you, that's a live source.
If you're remembering,
coming.
if you're trying to remember all that, you're up here.
Right.
And this
right.
isn't really where you need to be.
And I know He says to be here. And tell me if you feel this, because I go and I spend time with my father, and you do it throughout the day. I understand that. But you go there at night, and you're spending time with Him, and then I do two things. I read the Bible, I sit quiet, and I pray. I do all three, so I'm covered in all my corners. But each of them brings something to make me awake. It really does. And so I was like, oh, Father, why did I screw up? I was rude. I was judgmental to that person. Before, when I saw that person, I had a judgment. I said, why is that judgment there? I don't want to be that person that says, oh, look at that person, da-da-da. And I'm like, that wasn't my thought, because I do not want that. I don't want it here. I don't want to be like that. I said, why do I keep doing this?
When you're up here trying to remember all these verses and chapters, and you're
I'm trying to remember them. I'm reading them.
right, but you also as Christians, I think we try to hold on to a something that is sweet to us. And have you ever noticed, even things my dad says, I used to say, oh, I'm going to write that down. And if I don't write it down, you know, it's gone. It's not meant. You're not meant to live up in this intellectual side of your mind. What was the tree in the Garden of Eden? It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Knowledge of good and evil. It's not meant to be remembered and regurgitated. That is a very mechanical thing. Have you ever heard of the Bible referred to as the Living Bible? Because it speaks into your soul. And you're supposed to, it becomes you. When you read something that you agree with, it becomes you. And you should adopt that. So if you think of adopting a child, that child's now your responsibility, your child. Right. When you adopt something that you love, it's yours. Mm-hmm. And your job is to take care of it and to honor what you have just, brought into your soul. So we have to learn, as human beings, to unlearn. Because we're so busy trying to learn Christianity or whatever religion that we love so much, when really God says, be still. And that's why we have this right here. We have this as a constant reminder to everybody because we can keep on referring to it. Be still and know that I am God. He doesn't say, take 12 years of college and know that I'm God. And then 2 extra years of this and that and theology. And it's really just very simple. You can be working. When the hands are at work, the mind is at ease. You can be fishing. You can be sitting. You can be meditating. Be still. And stillness doesn't mean that you're just sitting there like a zombie. I have noticed in my life that when I'm alone, I start having a conversation. Conversations are going on. Who the hell am I talking to up there? You know what I mean? My dad, I've heard him say dialogues with the devil. There's somebody that's I'm having a conversation with. And I notice my judgment side, my ego side, I'll call it my ego side. My ego side is always saying, you need to be the greatest. You will look better if this happens. You will sound better if this was said. That person took you down. You need to get revenge. Ego self talking to the little boy inside of me, the little girl inside of you. The ego self has all these conversations going on up there. And again, if I give it up to God and I say, I'm confused. Who is that in my head? If Jesus could walk into the room, put his hand on mine on the side of the bed and say, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Let go. Let go. So my wife said this to me this morning, back to this morning's conversation. She said, I said to her, I noticed you didn't cry. My wife's a crier. She cries. My friend Diane's a crier. She cries at the drop of a hat. My nephew who's sitting here is a crier. We talked about it. The side of the family is a crying family. They cry. They get emotional. They run with the emotion. It feels so good to just let go and cry. Crying is actually quite nice. I mean, it feels good. You never thought about that crying feels good, but people love to cry. It feels good. It's a release.
I don't know if they're even trying because I have the crying thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be your father. It can be speaking the truth. It doesn't really seem to matter. I could be reading the word, and I could be listening to another minister speaking, or I can hear certain things. And if it has God in it, it touches my heart. I want to cry.
Okay.
But why are you crying, Mary? I could be doing that. It's like, I'm so sorry, God. What?
Let me give you something. So here's what she said to me, and I thought it was really sweet because I have been an emotional person in my life. Emotions, is the rainbow of spectrums from love to anger and everything in between. So when we live in our emotions, we are subject to our emotions. When we live in our intellect, we're subject to our intellect, right? If you live in the moment, you're subject to him. That's why he says, be still and know. So my wife heard somebody say, she's a searching soul. The internet's there. It offers up all kinds of things. And the more you look in that direction, the more it starts offering you things like that. So, I don't know, she found somebody and they were talking about emotions, and she watched for a few minutes, and this person said something that just struck a chord. And he said to her, and since I didn't hear it, I'm going to give you the version that she gave me, which made perfect sense, was this pastor said, I don't want to give my wife my emotions. So I give my emotions to God, and God puts his stillness in my heart and his love in my heart, and that's what I give to my wife. And she told me that, and I went, wow, that's a big deal. So, when you feel all those emotions and you feel that crying, and you feel all those emotions and you feel that crying, if you give it to God and let God put his love in your heart, the emotion isn't there. All of a sudden, it's just love. And that's not an emotional thing. God's love is not an emotional thing, because emotions are of the world. God's love is a light that is inside of you, that is a strength. So yesterday, during this 5-minute thing that happened, it was a surprise. My daughter actually said, "Dad, why don't you renew your vows?" And I said, "Okay." She goes, "But don't tell Mom. Let's just surprise her." Everybody says, "Oh," even my nephew on the way out, he says, "Oh, Auntie Jan is going to just cry her eyes out." And I said, yeah, she will. And she didn't. She didn't cry at all. So on the way home, I said, "I noticed you didn't cry." She said, "No, I gave my emotions to God, and I just accepted what was happening, and it was really nice." I mean, I've been with this woman, married 33 years, together almost 38. That's almost 4 decades. My wife would cry if she thought a flower was pretty. And this was an amazing thing. Our 2 grandchildren were there, our children, my nephew, who I hadn't really had much of a life with for 31 years since he was born, and all of a sudden he comes back to me. And I thought for sure she would cry, and she didn't. And it's not something that she had to learn. It was something that it agreed with her. She adopted it. It was hers. And the first time she had a chance to not cry, she just gave it up to God and just was in the moment. And here I am saying to her all these sweet things, and I saw her eyes start to get a little tiny bit watery. And I'm looking her right in the eye. Our faces were this far apart, and she did not cry. And I remember when we got married, as soon as she saw me, and she comes walking down the aisle, in essence, she just exploded in tears and never stopped through the whole thing. That was her. And I thought it was cute. So, men, when you see your lady crying and you feel powerful because you've made her cry, because whether you've said something amazing and beautiful, or you've said something horribly painful and you probably shouldn't have, there's making another person cry. The person that did it has a sense of greatness if you stand back and think about it. When somebody cries in front of you, it's like that person is being weak.
It all comes when something just touches your heart for some reason. And I said, "Lord, I don't want to cry all the time. Every time I read your word, it just..."
So Mary, why don't you give up?
So I questioned it, and I said, "Lord, let it be if it's meant to be that way. I don't want to be a phony baloney. I want to be the real thing."
All right, but now that we've had this conversation, next time you feel that emotion welling up, because that emotion is still overcoming you, just so you know. And there's nothing wrong with crying. Don't get me wrong. Nothing wrong with crying, because sometimes you need a release. You've seen my dad do what we call these exorcisms all these years. And my dad actually says, he says, ultimately it's a release. You're releasing the pain that you've been carrying around, that's been buried underneath everything, and all of a sudden here it comes, and it's a horrible release. And emotions are that way. And sometimes you cry and it's a release. But if you're a crier, I hope you're listening, people. If you're a crier, look at this opportunity to adopt giving that up to God and just saying, "I just want to be still." Meditate on that. If you just be aware, be still and know that He is God. This is you're actually medicating, self-medicating when you cry, because it feels good. And you're actually kind of feeling it and feeling good, and it's not really meant to be a feeling. It's not a feeling. I'm going to be 60, and I think I've cried one time in the last 40 years, once. And you know what? No one was there. And the reason was because on my 30th birthday, we lost a baby, and it was what's called anencephalic. The brain didn't form properly, and my wife went into labor on the 7th month, which happened to be Father's Day weekend, which happened to be my birthday that year, my 30th birthday. So it's been almost 30 years ago. And we had a child, so my second child, and the baby was born and died. And there was nothing that could be done. The doctor said, don't go looking for an answer on this. It just happens. It's one of those things in life. It's either chemical or it's electrical or it's, we really don't know as doctors. And they said, don't go looking for an answer. It always happens on the second child. It always happens to a female child. And he just said, just go make another baby. So I went and I called my dad. And my son, when my doctor told us that this was going to happen, I'm holding my son. He's asleep on my shoulder. And so I had to be strong. Man has to be strong. I always thought, I have to be strong, I have to be strong, I have to be strong. You have the power to overcome these emotions. You do have the power to overcome them. They can either overcome you or you can overcome them. I stayed strong. My wife, of course, she was falling apart. She gave birth to the baby died. I never cried. I never cried. I couldn't allow myself to cry. I called my dad, and my dad said, I called him on a payphone at a Dairy Queen because I just needed to go take a walk, and across from the hospital was a Dairy Queen. And there was a payphone booth, and I could hear the cars going by, and I closed the door, and my son slept through this whole thing for like an hour. And I called my dad, and I said, the baby died. He says, what? How could that be? I said, and I told him what it was. He says, well, son, he says, it's a shame. He says, but when God wants you to have a perfect baby, just like a tree drops a leaf, you drop the leaf and you'll have another perfect baby. He says, this one wasn't meant to be because God wants you to have a perfect baby. So I never cried. Do you want to know why I cried? I didn't cry through that whole thing. And I see my friend crying. But when I saw the movie Braveheart, I don't know if everybody's seen the movie Braveheart. If you haven't seen it, watch it again. But when I saw Braveheart and when I saw his wife get raped and killed, and I didn't cry in the movie, but like 2 days later, and I don't want to give away the movie for anybody that hasn't seen it, but 2 days later I was driving along and all of a sudden that thought came into my mind, how much I love my wife and my children. And for some reason, I just started crying when I was driving along. That was probably 25 years ago. But to me, I always felt like because I'm my father's son, and I've never seen my father cry, and I'm 60 years old. I've heard that he's cried. My sister told me he cried one time, but I thought, Dad doesn't cry. He's the rock of my life. So I've always looked at crying, to me, as a man, as Roy Masters' son, as something that I needed to overcome because it was a weakness that I didn't want to have. Now, if I could look at all my weaknesses the way I looked at crying, I'd be some kind of a guy. But I just picked that one and I always watched it. So I married a woman that cries all the time. And when I saw her not cry, I had such a renewed respect for my wife because she overcame through not her own will. I used my will to overcome crying. Not through her own will, but by giving up her emotional state to God and being in the moment and being still. And that's more important than anything. Our will, we can do a lot with our will. We can, you can chop off your own arm and stand there and watch the blood squirt out and just will yourself not to even have emotion. What good does that do? That's just will. That's human will. We've got to give up our will. We have to yield to God's will. Then you are just in that stillness where you can actually be still and know that He is God, and nothing of the underworld can touch you. Nothing. No fear, no emotion, nothing can drag you down because you are actually in God's bubble of protection because you are yielding to God. And then that thing has to try and deal directly with God because you're a conduit. And that is strength. I think it was Winston Churchill that said something about emotions, and I'm probably going to botch this, but you'll get the gist. Emotions are a reaction. Courage is a choice. So do you want to live an emotional life, or do you want to choose to have a courageous life? And you know what it takes to be courageous in this life? Is to realize that you're nothing. And without God, you truly are nothing. You're just a pimple. You're less than a pimple. You're less than a hair on God's ear.
You know, I'm glad you said that, because one of my questions is, because I'm emotional, and in that I don't like to watch violence. I don't want to. It has to be a story that reveals truth in some form, but violence doesn't. But you know what I notice about me is wrong. I meant something. Okay, I have a hard time because the world right now is so messed up. And there's so much violence and people hurting each other constantly through words, through actions, through just in your face kind of thing. And people chopping people's heads off and, you know, whatever's going on right now. I am emotional about that. And I said, God, you know, how do I deal with this? Because I don't like seeing all that. I don't like people hurting each other, because you know that they're doing, and they don't know that they're doing the will of the devil. Because that's his part.
Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
Forgive them, and you understand that. You see that. But how come, if you can help me on this part, that would be cool. I see that, and I'm hurt by it, and I can get emotional because it's wrong for people to hurt each other.
That's your mistake right there, though.
There, see? And I love what you just said right now, because you could be courageous. And that was the really...
See, if you have this anger, this emotional anger and judgment towards all the wrong that happens in the world, you're already in the wrong place, I can tell you. Because I'll give you an example. You go outside and you look at there's a sunflower growing in my yard right now. And it's funny because I'm trying to grow everything, and the weeds grow without me trying to do anything. I don't have to touch them and they'll grow. And I'm trying to grow all these pretty things because I want my yard to be pretty and gorgeous, and everything grows that isn't supposed to grow, and I don't even water it. And how does it grow? Right? It's bizarre. So the harder I try to make these things grow, they die. I overwater them and they die. It's like I'm over-loving them, and they actually die. And I thought to myself, isn't this strange? So out of the dirt, all of a sudden pops this thing, and I'm watching it. It's getting taller and taller and taller, and I'm like, somebody said, that's a sunflower. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll let it see what happens. It's like 9 feet tall.
Yeah, that happened to me exactly.
And so I decided, well, maybe I'll water this thing. So every now and then, I give it a little tiny bit of water. And it's like got a sunflower now like this big. In that sunflower, there is the battle between good and evil going on in the insect world. Let me tell you, if you could see what's going on in there are creatures eating other creatures. Eating. Imagine if, we were insects. Roger looks pretty good. I think I'm going to eat his head today. I can take him. He's old. I can eat his head. And that's the insect world. The strong taking over the small, right? It's the world and the insect world and under the ocean. We caught a fish. I think I might have told some of my friends this. We caught a lingcod in Alaska the other day. This lingcod was probably about 40 pounds, or 35 or 40 pounds. Inside the lingcod was a full salmon, so big that half of it was in its stomach, and the tail was curled, and in the throat of the lingcod was the snout of the salmon, because it was just too big to fit inside of the lingcod. There was like a 9-pound salmon inside the lingcod. And so you opened its mouth, literally, its head was as big as mine. You opened its mouth was that big, and you could see the mouth of the salmon in its throat. Yet that lingcod tried to eat more. Because it tried to eat, we had these gigantic things that we were trying to catch the lingcod with. This huge lure. Even though it was choking to death on a salmon, it tried to eat more. So in the undersea world, in the insect world, in our world, there's evil, ugly things going on all the time. And if you get emotional about it, all you're doing is setting yourself up to be taken down by that emotion. You just have to realize that in this world, there's a lot of evil things that go on. And you want to be on the world, but not of the world. Don't deal in lies. Don't deal in anger. Don't deal in emotions. What you need to do with this whole thing, with all these things as you see them, just watch them. Just watch. Just be conscious. Be conscious of them. And if you're conscious of them, that's like shining God's light on them. Because really what happens is the devil's job is to catch you when you're off guard and kind of lure you, almost like when I went fishing, I used a lure, right? And when the fish bit on it, he was caught. So when you are being lured by the devil and you bite on it and start getting angry, he's pulled you away from God.
It's a distraction.
He's pulled you away from God. So just be conscious of all these things. It really boils down to be still, be calm. My dad has been saying, I walked into my dad's house the other day and I was energized, I guess I'll say that. And he says, calm. And I went, okay.
Now, see, this is a different perspective, because now you have to apply that stillness in every little thing. And I never thought about that part. I said, God, I don't want to be hurt by that. I can't stop what's going down. But I don't want to feel this, because I can see, I actually can see that it's controlling me.
All things work together for good for those that love the Lord. Everything that is happening in this world is orchestrated by God, or by God allowing the devil to do his deed. But at the end of the day, all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. So even as hard as the devil tries, sometimes those who are not willing to pay attention to their Father will be taken. So be it.
The rod and the staff comfort me. The rod is the law. But when it says, preparest the table and the cup runneth over, the cup that runneth over is the strength of the Lord. And that is, that's what I learned today, that strength is not your strength. And that cup runneth over. He has, the ultimate power. But like you say, you have to be the conduit for that strength. And I thought that was important.
No, it's good. And it's funny for me. I have these few people that come here that I know most for many years. And like my wife and my family members on her side are all emotional. They're quick to cry. And I think it's a mechanism to perhaps a protection, because who keeps browbeating a person that's crying? Only a real person that is full of rage. So I used to think that my wife would cry in order to shut me up. And I used to say to her then, you can cry all you want. I'm going to finish saying what I have to say. So I've always wondered about this crying. But the other day when she didn't cry, and Diane, I love you. My friend Diane is here, who I see her every single one of these. I see her cry. And I think, how can I tap into something to help? Because I think it's important. There's an inner crying and an outward crying. And I think that if we can learn how to hand that emotion over to God and let Him put His peace in our heart. And that's really the consciousness that a person has to have. And it takes time sometimes. It takes a calmness and a quiet, and maybe one last good cry. I don't know. I don't know what it takes. But when I heard my wife say that, I immediately said, that's it. I got to get rid of all these emotions. Love, hate, lust, anger, laughing, joking, the realm, the spectrum of all these things that are all puppet strings that are reversed. They're coming up from under the ground. The devil's, kind of like got rods almost. And I'm just puppeting along like everybody else that is a puppet to those emotional things. Not that I want to be completely without emotion, because I would just be an odd duck, but I don't want them to rule me. I want to keep an eye on them, and I want to, when they start to get stronger than I can handle, I want to say, okay, God, I'm going to give this one up to you. I'm just going to be quiet.
The words that I hear from your father and others have caused me to cry, but I'm crying because I'm sorry for. So that seems to be different from the type of crying that you're talking about.
I'm not going to say that there aren't different types, okay? But I will say this, that after I've cried, I feel okay. And I don't want to feel okay, because just because I cried doesn't make me okay. Just because I know the devil is evil doesn't make him go away. Everybody, I'd like to introduce you to my nephew Chase, who's about 31 years old, and he's lived a pretty tough life. And the other day, now that I'm in charge of dealing with FHU and taking FHU into the future, one thing I noticed is that there was a lot of letters from prisoners. And I looked at these letters and I thought to myself, these people are in a place where they don't have much choice but to either search for God or, get better or get more bitter. And so we were writing the letter because the convicts, they actually asked for books from my dad. And my dad always will give the convicts books, and it's been going on like that for years. And I was thinking to myself, I wish Chase was here. And so and there's a reason for that, because Chase has been in 7 prisons. And I called him and I said, Chase, it's Uncle Alan. Give me a call. And he calls me back and he says, hey, Uncle, what's going on? I said, I need your help. I need your help with our prison outreach. And I thought, there's nobody better than a person that has been there to understand what the others are going through that are there. And Chase's story is pretty unusual because, he found himself in prison for doing something stupid. And it actually is not even that big of a deal. And he can tell the story if he wants or not, but it doesn't matter. It's not how he ended up there. It's that he did end up there. And then he had to take this crazy, crazy path in life. And he's got tattoos and he's got a lot of scarring on his soul. But he finds that he was in there and one day found one of my father's books and thought, this is my relative. I should probably read this book. I'm going to let you take it from there, Chase.
So I was going through the worst time of my life. Losing the love of my life. I was in love with a woman, got sent to prison, and I just didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to breathe without this person always on my mind. And it was like the more I tried to make her happy, the less it helped. And I come across Roy Master's book in the library on a complete accident. And it was called The Art of Understanding Sexuality, 1978. And, the cover of it looks like a romance novel, So I'm already like, okay, I'm gonna get a lot of stuff from the other guys about reading this because they're gonna think I'm reading some kind of
Romance novel.
Yeah, romance novel, yeah. But it really helped heal my soul because just a couple of the biggest lessons I had to learn was to not be codependent on someone's approval who won't lift a finger for you. And all the time we think we're supposed to go through these doors, and they're locked, and we try to kick them down, and sometimes it takes us a long time of kicking that door to realize it ain't gonna open. And we think, oh, all hope is lost for our future plans. But then we be still and know. Be patient. Your patience is your best virtue that you could exercise. Be patient and know, because later on, these other doors are going to open. You're not even going to even see them coming, and you're going to realize only then that's why all that bad happened, so I could be here.
So with that, I've been becoming friends with him over the last few years, watching what he was writing on Facebook, of which I noticed you peeled off of that recently.
Just temporary.
But he was writing some very profound things. And I would send him little notes, and we would talk in the middle of the night, texting, because he was a night watchman for a resort of some sort.
I've worked primarily in law enforcement, both before my incarceration and after. It's just
Isn't that interesting?
where I always fit in. I feel like I was just mistaken.
He actually is a really, really good person. Made a mistake, reacted wrong, reacted more like an animal than a higher thinking man that he's trying to become now. And it just kept tumbling him further and further down into the system. And this guy has got some stories. He almost died one time and kind of had an out-of-body experience. He was telling me the other day, I was like, wow. The injustice that's been on him inside the system. But it all happened. I said to him, Chase, you know, all of that has happened so you can now roll it up into a ball and tie it up into a knapsack, throw it over your shoulder, and go do good with it. How do you make bad into good? All things work together. All things work together for those that love the Lord, even the bad. And so he went through that. He chose that path a little bit. I think, you know, at the end of the day, we choose our path. But now he can do some good with it. So I said, are you willing to help us with our prison outreach? And he says, yes, Uncle, I am. He had a chance to be emotional and afraid, but instead he rose up with courage. And I respect that about him. And like all of us, he is still daily trying to be still and know. Daily. And so I think some people may say, well, look at him with these tattoos of dragons. And look at him. Look at the judgments. But you know, you could say the same thing about me. Who the hell is Alan? Well, how does Alan have the right to sit there and fill his father's shoes? I don't want to fill my father's shoes. He's written 22 books for you guys. He's got 50 years of recordings and videos and lectures. But we're all just trying to help each other. To Mary's point, if we set a good example for somebody, that's the ripple effect. Maybe that person will go, you know, I saw Mary do this, or I saw Diane or Roger or Dave or Chase. And because we naturally want to follow a man or a woman with a good heart. And I know that Chase has a good heart. And so this calling inside of me to call out to him, I didn't know what I was going to get. I didn't know if he'd be interested. I don't know what I could do for somebody in prison, but if I go there with Chase and let Chase tell his little story or stories that he's got many of and say, you know what, I got helped by this guy Roy Masters, and here's some books, and we'll give them to you. And maybe we can help some of those people in those prisons. So Chase has offered to help me do that and to help the foundation do that. And so I just want to say thank you for having so much courage, my friend.
Thank you for offering it to me, because it's food for the soul to do something like this. Yeah. It's not something, you know, we're not in this life for ourselves. We're in this life to leave this world a better place the way God wants us to do it. God has divine plans for us, and we always have to be patient and know God has a divine plan for us, and take immense security in that. And if you let your emotions overrule you.
Speak of that. Show the finger. This finger right here. I said to him, what happened to that finger? And he tells me the story, but tell me why you feel like that finger. You put it into a nice little package. You said because you weren't protected. You were outside of God's protection. Because this guy was a bouncer. He's done so many things, and it's like he has one punch, and now he's got a finger that's messed up. But what did you say?
I've gotten into literally hundreds of fights, and I've never gotten hurt. It was because I've always fought in self-defense of myself or others. But I fought my best friend out of an impulse, out of an old habit.
The old chase.
The old side of me, and
did you say it was an unholy
I
thing?
should have exercised more patience with my friend. I should, and I tried to give him plenty of warnings, but I think.
How did you characterize that? You said it was an unholy fight.
Because it was a fight that I went into that was an unrighteous fight.
There you go.
I was not protected, and I fractured my finger on his teeth.
The whole fight consisted of one punch.
Yeah.
And he's been in all these fights, and he's always been there to protect somebody because he was a bouncer, and two people fight, he has to break them up and sometimes fight. But all that doesn't matter. But I loved how he said it was like an unprotected fight.
Yes.
And aren't we all fighting the fight of our lives? We're all, trying to stand up, be courageous, and fight against injustice. But it really needs to be a holy fight. It needs to be a fight on behalf of Him, and not on behalf of our own will and our own ego and pride and all that. So I just thought that's so interesting.
I would just like to say one thing to everybody. I'm sensing a message that I need to say here, and that's we can only give what we have inside of us. Take, for example, any item in your house. You can give that to somebody, but if you don't have that item, you cannot give it. Now, what you fill yourself inside yourself, your bodily vessel, which this is just a shell of the God Spirit's electricity that He sent into this dust made of earth. We can only give what we have inside. If we have hate inside, that is all we will have to give to somebody. If we have sadness inside, that's all we will have to give. But if we have love, joy, humbleness, that is all we will have to give as well. So be careful about any thought you think, any emotion that because you're going to have a lot of thoughts that come, a lot of emotions, and you have to pick very wisely which ones to listen to and which ones to just let it pass by you, let it go away, because we only have to give what we have inside.
I love he's like a baby Christian. There's a lot of Christians out there that call themselves Christian, but I think when we start to awaken to our real purpose, you're like a baby again. And as much as I know, this guy could be in a cage fighting any of the best cage fighters out there, and that's what he wanted to be.
I was going to fight in the UFC back when I was 21. I was.
He's also as sweet as a dove. So please send us your questions. We will dissect them and try and answer them. And thanks for watching. Your donations help tremendously. It's going to help with our prison outreach and our general outreach.